Hey everyone, how's it going? Today I want to show you how stupid Craig, Fight the Flat Earth, is, and how he's got a total lack of understanding of what science really is. And I'm going to use his own Baltardia idol, Professor Dave, to show you that Craig's a moron. But first, let's have a little listen to Craig white knighting for Professor Dave.
So, just before we get to science, can I ask you a question about Professor Dave?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you accept that I was right that he is a professor?
I said technically he's not a professor, like I told you today, because he was a lecturer before he got his master's. He obviously, I consider he got his master's in 2018 that I saw today. But you'd have to first have your master's, then you go become a lecturer, then you become a professor. And he's not lecturing at the moment at any place, is he?
So in America, to be classed as a professor, you simply have to have taught at college. That's it. That's the only criteria to be a professor.
Yeah, in America, I looked it up, you have to have a degree. At least you have to have a degree, and then you can be professing at a community college. But that's
or even
about
high school, technically, in America.
But like I said, it's technically,
he's never, so when flat earthers say he's lying about being a professor, that's not true. Because he is a professor by all definitions of what he does, teaching at college level, regardless of his education, he is a professor.
That's what I say, technically he's not, because he's not lecturing at any institution. So he's not a professor. You have to literally lecture at institution at the highest degree of his
he has lectured at colleges, and therefore he is a professor.
Remember, he lectured before he got his degree, so he was not a professor.
It doesn't matter.
That's what I say, technically he's not.
In America, it doesn't matter what the qualifications are. As long as you have taught at college, you are classed as a professor.
Okay, so we'll just both say, I'm going to say on a technical aspect, he's not a professor though, but I'll concede he's got the qualifications to be a professor, if he had to go and walk and become a lecturer now.
But the thing is, what I'm saying is, the fact that he taught at college at all, that's what makes him a professor. It doesn't matter if he had a master's or not. The fact that he taught at college is by definition what makes him a professor.
Okay, but like I said, we can agree to disagree. On a technical aspect, he could be, but that's in America. But as far as I know, the way you need to get to become a professor, he hasn't fulfilled that criteria.
I mean, individual countries' definitions are very different. That's something we can both agree on, 100%. Right? Okay, right. It's just interesting, so many flat earthers say, oh, you're not a professor when he is. But anyway, Professor Dave out of the way.
So, according to Craig, Dave is a real professor, so he should know what he's talking about when it comes to science and the scientific method. Now, Craig also thinks he knows what he's talking about when it comes to science and the scientific method, because he...
I very much understand the scientific method, being that I've done a degree in physics.
Okay.
Or bullshit and let it ring through the land.
Ah, cool, Craig. If you understand the scientific method, why do you think you could have more than one IV?
You got 4 different IVs. What is the one IV? You can only have one IV for hypothesis. What is your IV?
My IV is the variables.
What?
And who said you can only have one V? Can you give me a citation? You can only have one IV and a hypothesis. And who said you can only have one V? Can you give me a citation? You can only have one IV and a hypothesis. And who said you can only have one V? Can you give me a citation? You can only have one IV and a hypothesis.
Let's see what your good old buddy, your good old friend, Professor Dave, who you white knighted for, has to say on this subject, Craig, shall we?
Hey, it's Professor Dave. I want to tell you about the scientific method. We might choose to drop an apple and a feather, and the result would seem to support our hypothesis. But if we are clever, we will realize that we need to eliminate all the extraneous variables. When we do science, the ideal situation is to limit an experiment to one independent variable and one dependent variable.
Hold on a minute. What was that? Let's hear it again, Dave.
When we do science, the ideal situation is to limit an experiment.
And who said you can only have one V? Can you give me a citation? You can only have one IV and a hypothesis.
To one independent variable and one dependent variable.
But because I can't verify the expert that Dave's got his information from...
I didn't know it was going to become the centerpiece of my life, and that it'd become successful and everything, and that I'd go on to explain dozens of other topics, including topics I'd know nothing about, but I hire experts in the field to write me the scripts, and then consultants to look at the scripts and look at the finished animations and make sure it's all good, right? I'm not professing to be an expert, honestly, in any academic field, not even chemistry.
So I'll provide my own citation. By Anne-Marie Elmenstein, PhD, updated on July 27, 2019. A hypothesis is an educated guess or prediction of what will happen in science. A hypothesis proposes a relationship between factors called variables. A good hypothesis relates an independent variable and a dependent variable. The effect on the dependent variable depends on or is determined by what happens when you change the independent variable. While you consider any prediction of an outcome to be a type of hypothesis, a good hypothesis is one you can test using the scientific method. In other words, you want to propose a hypothesis to use as a basis for an experiment. Now you see here where it says independent variable, that's singular, not plural. That means there's only one. And a dependent variable, single, not plural, means there's only one. You understand, Craig? One IV, one DV. So here's what I think you ought to do, Craig. Instead of running round and challenging flat earthers to debates, I think you should get in touch with Professor Dave and challenge him to a debate because he disagrees with you, or maybe get in touch with Anne-Marie Elmenstein, PhD, because she disagrees with you as well. You're not on a level to be debating flat earthers, mate. You're a moron.